Welcome to the Global Influencer Effectiveness Summit, a masterclass series for raising your impact as a thought leader. I'm your host, Sylvia Schroeder, and in this event, we are going to explore unconventional approaches of thought leaders to ignite change in others. My today's guest is Dr. Bettina von Stamm, and I'm so happy and pleased to have you, Bettina. Hi.
Hello. I am absolutely thrilled and delighted to be here with you as well.
And actually right now we are traveling. We are in England. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So where are you? Where are you located in England?
Actually, it is a small village outside a small town called King's Lynn. Mm-hmm. And normally people haven't heard where King's Lynn might be, but they generally know where Cambridge is. Mm-hmm. And Cambridge is halfway between London and King's Lynn. And I'm just outside of King's Lynn. So very beautiful and takes forever to get to.
I see. Well, for us, it's easy, you know. It was
Indeed.
Easy to get there.
Advantage of the virtual world.
Yes, it is. So I just want to introduce you. And so Dr. Bettina von Stamm has been an original visionary thinker in the field of innovation since 1992. And so she has worked for quite a while independently, actually for 12 years. And she founded the Innovation Leadership Forum. And there she offers a variety of innovation masterclasses, seminars, workshops, as well as coaching. And she helps senior managers and innovation leaders understand and address barriers to innovation and create sustainability innovative in organizations. So actually, Bettina is also a writer. She is a public speaker, and she wrote quite a lot of so stunning articles. And I mean, you're really a pro in the field of innovation. So therefore, it's just amazing to have you. And
Thank you.
So talking about innovation and talking about unconventional, because it's kind of, you know, interwoven. So what would you say? Why do we need unconventional approaches?
I think we definitely need unconventional approaches. I absolutely agree. And I think we need unconventional approaches because for me, the context of the 21st century is something that we have never experienced before. And, you know, good old Einstein, who already said we cannot solve problems and challenges with a mindset that has created them. So if we are trying to use accustomed approaches, what has worked in the past, what we are used to, if we want to get a handle on the 21st century, they will not be sufficient. So therefore, we do need different ways of thinking, and which is probably not exactly the same as more innovation as understand traditionally.
Mm-hmm. Well, this leads me to the next question indeed, you know. So what do we understand when we talk about innovation?
I think I would argue that not many people really think about what they mean when they say innovation. They use the word a lot.
Yes.
And when you ask them, so what do you actually mean? And why do you want innovation? And what kind of innovation do you want? The answers are generally quite interesting because a lot of time it is silence. Mm-hmm. You know, you just think, oh yeah, actually, yeah, what do I mean by innovation? What do we as an organization mean by innovation? And I find that, I always like to say there is such a hype around innovation, or has been developing over the last 10, 15 years, that people do not ask the question, why do we want to innovate anymore? Innovation has become the end in itself, whereas it really should be a means to an end. And I think that's in a lot of organizations, it's on the website, it's in the annual reports, it's when the CEO stands up to talk about it, is we need to become more innovative, we need radical innovation. And that's it. Mm-hmm. You know, if you ask people, have you got a shared definition of what you mean by innovation? There's often no. If you ask, have you defined what kind of innovation, what level of innovation? You say you want radical innovation. Do you actually know what that means and involves? And are you really willing to go there? Because generally it requires different structures, different systems, different skill sets in order to make it successful. Do you know that? Is that what you really want? And that's what you're really willing to do? And very often again, is that, oh, that's a really interesting question. Maybe we should think about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and very often innovation is related to vision. So especially in organization, when they talk about innovation, they really feel like they have a lack of vision. And very often, so we talk about visionary leadership. So you're an expert in that. So what do we need? Do we mean by that?
Well, I think first of all, it is really, leadership is one of the key. If you want to create a more innovative organization, leadership is the key. Is the key, and there is a whole lot of other things that you need to do. And I think that's another thing that frustrates people about innovation is it's not one quick fix. It's not, let's introduce a new process, which is what a lot of organizations do when they start out on their innovation journey. They think, oh, right, let's have an idea suggestion scheme. Let's have an idea management scheme. Let's introduce a process for managing our project so we've got better control over how we go about it. Yes, that is quite helpful, but really insufficient. And when you're saying that innovation is linked to vision, I 100% agree. And I also see that in reality, that doesn't often seem to be the case. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you ask people, what is your organization about? It is, beat the competitors. That's not a vision. That is not inspiring. For me, vision and inspiration go hand in hand, have to go hand in hand. And I always like to say, if you can create a really meaningful and exciting vision for your organization, you do not need to talk about innovation. Because people will, if they're inspired by the vision that you have created, they will do anything to get there. And getting there generally means to innovate. And you don't need to talk about it, because I think using the word innovation, many people are not really comfortable with it. Many people feel, but I'm not really innovative. I'm not really creative. And so if the CEO stands up and says, we need to be all more creative and innovative, they go, oh my God, I'm not. What will happen to me because I'm not creative and innovative? And so rather than being inspired, when we're inspired, our creativity flows, our ideas flow, we are having, our imagination gets fired up. And instead, when the CEO stands up and says, we need innovation, it's achieving the opposite. People get nervous, they get concerned, they get worried, they think, oh my God, I'm not. And if we want to have a very simplified view of our brain, there's the old part and there's the new part. And the old part is about fight and flight and closing down and just seeing red and all these kinds of things, whereas the new part is about imagination, reflection, creativity. We need to be in the new part in order to innovate. Yet by the mere fact that the CEO stands up and says, we need innovation, and we might think we are not, we're immediately in the red zone where we can't possibly innovate. And so therefore, saying, I'm also not for the gospel that you need to be with the back against the wall in order to innovate. I know that sort of is a very, very commonly shared view. I think much more powerful is to give a really inspiring vision that will get people to innovate from a very different starting point, with much more freedom, with much more courage, with much more willingness to come up with crazy things, which, of course, again, Einstein said, if something's not crazy at the outset, there's no hope for it. Yet in organizations, if someone comes up with something crazy, they're probably asked to take a couple of days holiday because, clearly they've lost it. So this is why, coming back to vision and leadership, this is why visionary leadership is so critical to innovation. Because I would argue that is almost all, it's not, of course it's not, but almost all you need in order to get innovation going. Then, of course, you need to the other role of leadership, in addition to creating the vision, is to create a context where innovation can actually happen. And more often than not, it means getting out of the way.
Getting out of our own way, or
yeah, well, if I'm saying, I'm the leader and I'm saying I want innovation, and then I'm trying to micromanage and control every aspect of it, then people will they'll be turned off. They will withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to control it too tightly, that doesn't work. And this is also why a very clear and inspiring vision is important, because otherwise, when you just say we need more innovation, what innovation? We also come back to the definition, the importance of a definition, understanding of innovation. If you just say we need more innovation, then everyone will run off in a different direction, because everyone understands innovation to be something different. For some, it is incremental. For some, it's about services. For some, it's about products. For some, it's about doing something the company has never done before. And, without any guidelines, people run off in all sorts of directions, very excited to be able to innovate, often, and then just to be told, well, this is not really what we want.
But that brings me to the question of talking about guidelines. So can you give us an idea, how do you lead people into the same direction, following the same path, and what kind of guidelines are you providing to achieve a goal?
I think the first step would always be to help them experience the necessity for whatever I expect them to do. It's not about telling them. I think that especially in the 21st century, telling people what to do and just expecting them to get on with it is working less and less. People want to understand why, they want to influence what's happening, and so on and so forth. So the first thing is to create an understanding of, in this instance, why innovation is more important in the 21st century than it has ever been before. So to take them on a journey to describe the world of the 21st century and the aspects of it that make innovation so important. And do that not by bombarding them with facts, but much more telling stories that they can relate to. So that they can understand, for example, about the importance of a direction. If I just ask, have you got a great idea? Have you got a great idea? I mean, what are you supposed to say, right? So, but if it's, have you got a great idea on how we can move to X or be in Y in 10 years' time, or whatever it might be, then people can be constructive and contribute to that path. So, now I've almost lost my thread in terms of where else I was going with this.
Well, actually, we are talking about the guidelines, and we are on the
so sort of how to get them. Yes, thank you very much. How to get them there. So the first step is to help them understand the necessity. Why is it important? The second step would be to help them understand the conditions which enable innovation to happen. So what are things, for example, why is diversity so important in the context of innovation? Bringing together different mindsets, different value sets. And again, using little stories to illustrate the point. There's one story I love to tell, but it's quite long, so maybe it's not a good place to do it right here. But it's again using stories that people can connect to at a personal level. So it's not telling them; it's helping them to experience it in some shape or form. And so there are these, and the third aspect is sort of the beyond the conditions is for people to understand themselves better and what kind of contribution they as individuals have to make in the bigger context of innovation. Very often when we talk about innovation, we just think it requires creativity. Yes, it does require creativity and crazy ideas and blue sky thinking and whatever all these words might be. And it also requires people who have got a focus and a detail mindset who say, well, come on, let's pull this back a little bit. We actually also need to make it happen. And so for each person to understand what are my personal strengths and contributions in the context of innovation, and to acknowledge and respect that that actually everyone has to make a contribution. It is not just about the crazy people, about the creative people. It is about everyone, whatever their skill set is. And very often, of course, we prefer to work with people who are like us, right? When we say something, they smile at us and say, yes, I absolutely agree. And yes, I absolutely. And if we work with people who've got a different mindset, they might turn around and say, actually, why are you saying that? Why are you doing it like this? And very often, of course, we feel challenged. We feel, oh my God, does it mean I'm not doing it right? When you're asking me how I do things and you say, why are you doing it? Well, of course I would do it. That's the only way I know how to do it. And so therefore, when someone asks me why I do it, I feel challenged. And of course, as soon as I feel challenged, sort of my energy goes back into the old part of the brain, and I'm just only defensive, and and I'm not willing to listen anymore. And I just feel on how I can excuse myself and justify the way I've been doing things. And so to help people understand that we need to overcome these very natural behaviors that we all have, to be aware of them. So when someone asks this question, we use it as an opportunity rather than a threat. Like, well, that's an interesting question. I never thought about it. And what would it mean if we were to do it differently? What would be the outcome? Would there be a better way, better in terms of benefits, in terms of cost, in terms of whatever it might be?
So you're using stories to, kind of get them into the door. And I know that you use other tools as well. So
yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the other thing, and I have developed these picture cards. I have developed in the context of diversity. Actually, I mean, I was one of those people who would jump up and down and say, everyone needs to be more creative and innovative at the outset. And then I realized that requires, for a lot of us, changes in behaviors and probably even values. And, that doesn't happen just because someone tells me to do so.
Yeah.
Even if we want to change, it's quite hard. And anyone who's done their New Year's resolution knows how tricky it is to actually change. So that's not going to happen. And then I realized that actually, if we were all thinking alike, we would never get any innovation. There would no one ask the question why. And very often why is the trigger to find new approaches, i.e. to innovate. And at the same time, I also realized that if we have different mindsets, we have a different language almost. Right? We are using the same words, but the words have different meaning depending on which context we come from. And so we think we talk about the same stuff, but we don't really. And using these picture cards and asking people, for example, to say, what do you see as the major challenge to innovation in our organization? Choose a number of cards that represent the challenges that we face to innovate in our organization. And so then people, that's a deck of 84 cards, and then people choose the cards, and then they start actually to storytell using these cards. And when we're using words, we always assume shared understanding, shared meaning. If we're using a picture, it can be interpreted in a number of different ways. So whereas with words, we don't feel the need to explain any further. With pictures, we always have to. And so by using images, we have to share much more of our thinking, what is behind, what meaning is behind the word for us, and so on and so forth, and thereby enabling others to understand us much better. The other things I really like about the cards is, as I already mentioned, that people start to tell stories. And generally these stories are quite funny. If they use, use a tortoise to describe, the progress of innovation in their organization, everyone gets a little bit of a smile on their face. And of course, humor and laughter is one of the things that keeps us in the new part of the brain. So, and also, a lot of people experience if there's a tense situation and someone makes a humorous, not sarcastic or mean, but really humorous, positively humorous joke, the tension sort of dissipates. So keeping things in a positive mood and an open-minded mood is also what the cards contribute towards. And then the final thing I like about the cards, my jaw has dropped on several occasions using these cards because people are just so really open. They say things that I just really think, did you really just say that? With the entire senior management team here in the room, and you're just describing what's wrong with the organization. Right. And because it's generally a story, it's generally funny, and it is sort of once removed. It is sort of the cards become an intermediary that makes whatever the statement is less threatening. So I find that using images, particularly in a diverse context, whether it's card or whether it's any other form of images. That's why prototyping is so important in the context of innovation. In a way you can also prototype use these cards. Or I always describe prototyping as creating a reality that does not yet exist.
Actually, like your cards, yeah? So they are called a tool for visualizing the invisible. I mean, it's not only the picture cards, it's just... Yeah, I love the title to it,
Yeah, and so yes, absolutely, and it was part of the journey that I always feel that my own journey has always been realizing something and then finding a solution that would make it work. I mean, also with the storytelling, I used to present facts and figures, and I just saw people looking and nodding, but I could see it did not connect with them. You could see it got their mind, but it didn't get their heart. And figures don't get your heart. Stories do. And really, if you want to engage people, you need minds and hearts. If you want people to innovate, which requires courage, you need mind and heart. And not only numbers and figures.
So, and when you talk about prototyping, can you talk a bit more and describe what you understand by prototyping, and in which context do people and organizations need it?
I think, probably would call it, when I use the cards, I talk about creating representations. So it is creating a representation of a person's leadership style, creating a representation of a company's culture for innovation. So that's, for me, it is. I'm just trying to think whether prototype is a category of representation or the other way around. I'm not quite sure. But so prototype for me is to understand. It helps understanding, and B, creating shared understanding, and C, creating shared vision. So, for example, we all know that scenario planning, scenario building is really a powerful tool also in the context of innovation. So, for example, if someone said, right, we want to innovate to create our future, I would say, well, brilliant. And what does this future look like? So let's create a representation, create a prototype of that future, whether it is scenario or whatever shape or form that might be, whether it's a story, again, can be, representation of the future. And then to say, so if this is the future you envisage, what kind of role does your organization want to play in that future? And then look back and say, where are you, if that's where you want to be in the future, what do you need to change today in order to get on the path towards that future? And again, I find that what I would consider to be innovative organizations take the back from the future approach rather than the often used approach to say, right, what have you got? What are our skills? What are our competencies? Where can we go with that? Because... Yeah, go ahead.
And do you engage also hands-on activities, so they are really shaping their future?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I use sort of anything between 2 and 5 day workshops to building on the design thinking journey, where they actually, they need to draw, and they need to prototype the future. And then they need to prototype, and it means physically building it with cotton balls and pipe cleaners and Lego and whatever else inspires them, whether it is empty loo rolls or cardboard boxes, whatever. use all these things to physically create a representation of the future, and then to physically create the products and services that a person in that future might want or need.
Mm. And I think from my point of view, it's so important to dive into the hands-on experience, because first of all, we are engaged in our head, and then as you just described, open up the portal with vision, with images, but how do you dive into a physical experience and shaping it with your hands? And that makes another connection to your brain, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it is. And it really changes the level and depth of understanding. Mm-hmm. I mean, I like the example of a car manufacturer, sort of producer, well-known German car manufacturer, producer of sports cars, at the time when some of the engineering team had the idea of building an estate car, so with a hatchback. I'm never, different English-speaking nations have different words for it, so it's always a little bit tricky. But the hatchbacks or estate cars, as they are called here. And the board was, oh my goodness gracious, we can't possibly do that. That's just against our image. We can't. The engineers were pretty convinced that it would be a great idea. So they took one of their cars, cut it off after the driver's seats. Then they bought a competitor hatchback car, cut that one also off after the driver's seat, and put those two together. And then wheeled the whole shebang into the boardroom. And when the board members saw and could touch and feel and engage with this prototype, they realized, oh, maybe it's not a bad idea after all. And needless to say, it is one of the biggest revenue generators for that organization today. So there's also the seeing is believing. And as I always say, the more radical it is that you are trying to do, the more important it becomes to create a visual representation of what you are trying to do. Because the more important it is for people to really understand what you are trying to do. And if it is really so radically new, we sometimes even don't have the words to describe it properly. Yeah. And so visualization, visualizing what we are trying to do, prototyping is absolutely essential.
And in this activity of prototyping, when a team comes together, so all kind of characters working together on this new vision, and then they are creating this piece. But here again, once you see the outcome, it needs some kind of characters to really get to the really creating it and bring it out to the world. And that's what you mentioned before. So it needs different characters in a team to bring the vision into the world.
Yes. Yes. Also, I think the other thing is that once you have brought the diverse team together and they all really share a vision, don't only think they do, but they actually do. And these people then go back into their own worlds, as it were. And so in each of these different worlds, there is one person who really understands it and can communicate it back to the ones who are like them in the language that is required to communicate it in each of those different worlds.
And this is a very key point. The key point of really connecting the visionary world and the reality. So it's not lost in between, because very often people are so creative in the workshops and they have all kind of ideas. But what happens afterwards?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would doubt that. Well, I would argue that most organizations have drawers and drawers full of the results of brainstorming sessions. And then nothing ever happens with them. And again, I think it is coming back to the leadership role, that they have the courage to create ideas. They might even have the courage to select some of them, but to really implement them when the change, I always like to say, when the change really bites, when it becomes reality. That part is the most difficult one, and where a lot of things fall by the wayside. And very often they're not even killed properly. Sort of they are lingering in the background, draining resources, instead of sort of being saying, okay, right, kill this one, kill that one, let's go with this one.
And thank you so much for mentioning that, because that's so important for me, not only to ignite change, but also to implement change.
Yes.
And there it needs a process. There it doesn't, we need to be aware. We can't cut it off and say, oh, wow, we ignited the change. And there are many visions, ideas. So it's our role in our, leadership activity to really bridge it together with them and to find the implementation step. And that's what you do in all of your process, or? So
yes,
how do you do that?
absolutely. I mean, otherwise it's just a great idea.
Yes.
Great idea doesn't make a difference. It is a great idea being taken forward and implemented that makes the difference.
Yeah. And
I mean, otherwise I would, sorry. Yeah, I just say, otherwise it's creativity, not innovation. So creativity needs to be translated into reality in order to become innovation.
That's a beautiful explanation, just perfect. Bettina, so how do you help organizations to implement it? So what kind of process do you offer them?
Well, I see my role more at the front end in terms of creating the awareness and helping people understand. And then I draw on my network when it comes to the translation bit. I mean, it also depends. I mean, a lot of these workshops that I do are really about establishing this base understanding. It is almost like everyone talks about innovation and says we need it, and it's almost like I'm asking them to take a step back and to really consider what innovation means for them in their context at this particular point in time. And help them understand what it means and what it looks like. And I almost feel after that I can send them off. Almost, I mean, all the other processes exist. It's just filling them with life in a meaningful way. Or create if they are aware that they need a different different selection criteria when they want truly radical innovation versus when they just want incremental innovation. They know best what the appropriate criteria in their particular context are. I can make them aware that they do need different ones, and I can work with them to identify them. But basically, I think they are the ones who are the experts in their area. And this is why I always describe myself as a catalyst rather than a consultant. And it is my personal interpretation of the word consultant, which in my interpretation is about telling people what to do. And I know it is changing, but that's sort of the traditional approach. And for me, in innovation, it doesn't work, because innovation for me is so much about who and what we are as human beings and how we interact and how we hardwired, how our brain works. I mean, our brain thinks in boxes. When we see something, we have a little box in our brain. Oh, brilliant, it goes in that box. And so we don't have to think about it anymore. Just imagine that everything you encounter, you would have to think about again what it is and means. We would go absolutely crazy. So those boxes are really, really useful, except when we are facing a radical innovation. We just focus on the bits that are familiar and put it in the box that we already have, thereby probably killing it because we don't notice, we don't give enough attention to where it requires a different approach.
So what I hear you talking about is, in the end of this visionary process, you can also rely on their expertise. So once they've gone through the whole process and they've got really a new vision and the boxes are open, so there comes into place that they are the expert in the field, and now they take it from there. They bridge it in their way of thinking and abilities, and that's beautiful to know.
Yeah, then my role becomes one of a coach rather than a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it starts as a catalyst
Mm.
to change understanding, to create a different awareness, and then to become a coach to help them, live it, as it were.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way of picturing the whole process. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and talking about picturing, so I know you have got a framework as a free gift for our audience.
Mm.
So can you just describe what you
Oh,
got?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I said earlier that leadership is absolutely key, and leadership is not all. There's sort of, there's a whole system of things that you need to consider, because I always like to think about organizations as systems. And if you are changing one part of the system by saying you want to innovate, which is a change, requires different behaviors and so on and so forth, you need to understand how this requirements will affect the other parts of the entire system. And so back in the mid-90s, when I wanted to understand, we always talk about innovative organizations. And I wanted to understand, so what is it exactly, or where is it that innovative organizations do something different from their less innovative counterparts? And so there was this huge amount of literature that I chewed myself, or chewed through, and a very large number of interviews I conducted with people in industry, asking them, what do you do, what works, what doesn't work, what are challenges, and from all of the research and the interviews to distill areas where innovative organizations actually do something different from less innovative organizations. And that is what the framework is about. And not surprising, leadership is aspect of the framework, vision and strategy is aspect of the framework, culture, the processes that are being used, not which processes, but it's more about how they are being used, more so than what processes are being used, at least to a degree. And then it's also the physical work environment. How does the physical work environment support and nurture the kinds of behaviors that lead to innovation, like connecting different bodies of knowledge, like facilitating collaboration? And so if you've got an organization where everyone sits in their little boxes and people never meet, you are limiting the chances that innovation just naturally happens. Because innovation happens when connecting different bodies of knowledge. And so they are the 5 aspects inside the organizations. Then innovative organizations also do something different in the way they interact with the outside world, and also how they understand and react to the conditions. So very often an organization would assume that the industry conditions are a given. They have to operate within. And in my experience, highly innovative organizations will even challenge that and try to change it. They will always start, where do we want to be? And if that's where we want to be, what do we need to change today in order to get there? And that includes not only the aspects inside the organization, but also in the wider context.
Okay, so in this paper, this free gift you are offering, so people get a good overview of indicators of how it is related to each other and to one another.
I would like to think so. Yeah. So basically, it describes the elements of the framework, why they are important, and it's got a sort of a summary of leading practice. And so, and when you look at the table, I always say, we know a lot of this stuff. We generally fail to see it as a connected system.
Okay, so that's what people can really get once they download the gift, which is just a link underneath. And they can get a really good connection and overview how it is related to each other. Wonderful. Yes. Thank you. So once again, click the link underneath to access Bettina's wonderful gift. And Bettina, I was really happy to have you. It is a really pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Silvia.
So, folks, you have been hanging out with Sylvia Schroeder and Dr. Bettine von Stamm. And as you know, there are much more to come. So watch for your inbox tomorrow and see who is next with these amazing topics and enticing experts. But for now, we say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Servus. See you soon und bis bald.